We see public opinion polls literally everywhere, right? They pop up in our news feeds, shaping how we see the world with these really clean, simple numbers. But what if I told you the most important number isn't the one in the big headline? Let's dig in and find the hidden story behind the data. You know the drill. You see a number just like this, 45%. And it feels so solid, so official. It's presented like it's a hard fact, a perfect snapshot of what everyone is thinking. And of course, right next to that big number, you always see this little guy, the margin of error. It's supposed to make it all feel super scientific and trustworthy, to tell us, hey, this result is reliable. But honestly, it's often hiding a way bigger issue. So what if that little plus or minus number doesn't even begin to tell the whole story? The real story, the one that truly matters, is often buried much deeper. It's not in the numbers we see, it's in the voices we don't hear at all. Okay, so here's the first big problem for any poll. It isn't some kind of complicated math, it's just people. It all comes down to who actually picks up the phone or clicks the link. And, way more importantly, who doesn't. And this leads to a really fundamental issue called undersampling. So, what is undersampling? Well, basically, it just means the pollsters couldn't get enough people from a specific group, let's say young men, or maybe rural voters, to actually answer their questions. In the raw data, their voices are just too quiet, and that silence can totally warp the final result. And this is where things get kind of tricky. See, if you get too many responses from one group, that's called oversampling. It's actually a pretty easy fix. You just stop calling them. But undersampling? Whoa, that's the real nightmare for pollsters. You can't force people to answer, so they have to try and patch things up after all the data's already in. So what's the solution? How do they fix this mess? Well, they use a statistical tool called weighting. The best way to think about it is like they're grabbing the volume knob for those quiet voices and cranking it up, trying to make sure they're heard. Let me break it down for you. Imagine a pollster's goal is to survey 200 men in their 20s. But in the real world, only 50 of them actually respond. So, to fix this, they apply a weight of 4 to every single one of those 50 responses. Now, mathematically, those 50 people speak for 200. Problem solved, right? Well, not so fast. And this right here is where the whole thing can fall apart. Weighting is a mathematical patch, but it's based on one gigantic and honestly pretty dangerous assumption that the people who answered are basically the same as the ones who didn't. I mean, think about it. What if those 50 young men who actually bothered to answer the poll are, way more into politics or have much stronger opinions than the 150 who just ignored the call? By turning up their volume, you might just be amplifying a bias that throws the entire poll off track. This has a name, and it's a huge deal in statistics. It's called self-selection bias. The core idea is that the very act of deciding to take a poll makes you different from someone who doesn't. People with strong feelings or a real interest in something are just way more likely to want their voices heard. So here's the bottom line. You can use weighting to fix the numbers on age, gender, and location, but you absolutely cannot fix what's going on inside someone's head, their passion, how extreme their views are. You can't fix the very real risk that the handful of people who responded are nothing like the silent majority they're now supposed to represent. Now, I know this might sound a bit academic, but the real-world impact, it can be absolutely massive. Let's take a look at a real-world case study from a Korean poll that shows just how wild this can get. Okay, get this. The poll we're looking at had a response rate of just 3.8%. Let that sink in. That means for every 100 people they tried to contact, more than 96 of them basically said no thanks. That is a gigantic red flag right from the start, and it means the pollsters had to lean really, really heavily on weighting. And this is where it gets just wow. Let's zoom in on the data for one specific group, women in their 30s from a particular region. They were so hard to reach, the pollsters had to give them a weight multiplier of 3. But the real shock isn't the multiplier, it's the number of people they were actually multiplying. Just 3. That's it. The opinions of an entire demographic, a group representing hundreds of thousands of people, were being determined by the answers of just 3 individuals. Because of that 3x weight, the answers from those 3 women were counted as if they were 9 people. This is what's called statistical instability. Just imagine, if one of those 3 people had a different opinion, it could have totally flipped the results for their entire group. It's that fragile. And here's what happened because of it. In this particular poll, the small group of young women who did respond happened to be way more politically active and progressive than average. So when their voices got amplified by all that weighting, it created this massively skewed result showing 58% support for one party, far, far higher than the national average. So, what are we supposed to do with this information? It definitely doesn't mean all polls are useless, not at all. It just means we've got to be a little more skeptical, a little smarter about how we read these things. We have to learn to look past that big, shiny headline number. So next time you see a poll, here's a quick checklist to run through in your head. 1. Always look for the response rate. The lower it is, the more careful you need to be. 2. Be super skeptical of any dramatic findings about tiny subgroups. 3. If they even report it, watch out for crazy high weighting. And finally, the golden rule. Never, ever trust a single poll. Always look at the average of a bunch of them. So just remember that margin of error tells you about the mathematical uncertainty, but things like the response rate and the weighting, they tell you about the human uncertainty, and that is often so much more important. So the next time you see a poll, you'll know the right question isn't who's winning, it's, wait a minute, who actually answered the phone?